Over Labor Day weekend, we took our car up to Colorado National Speedway to take part in the Legend Invasion that they were holding up there. Both nights were $3,000 to win, and we did pretty okay with it being our first weekend with the car, but unfortunately we did get involved in a couple of incidents that rendered a couple of parts bent up and unusable from now on. So we're gonna go over the car and check out the rest of the damage, see if there's any more that we need to pay attention to before we go back out on October 7th. As of right now, the only parts that I'm 100% sure received a bit of damage were two of our bumpers. Obviously this one is still on the car, but one of them got bent up pretty badly, and our steering rod, which is supposed to be straight, and you can tell there's quite a bit of a yaw to it. We did get new ones thrown on the car before we ended up going out and racing on Sunday, since that incident did take place on Saturday. This bumper should still be usable. I know it's bent up quite a bit, but if we cut these tabs off and then run it over with the truck, we should be able to straighten it out for the most part. And then this one, either we can try and straighten out the tabs or just cut them off and weld new ones on. Right now we're waiting on tabs from our local dealer, so we're gonna go over the rest of the car. Hopefully that's all the damage that there is, but I'm sure once we start taking everything apart, we'll be able to tell a little bit better. So upon first glance under here, everything looks straight and looks fine. We are still going to swap out this radius rod right here that we use to adjust tow, as well as the heims for it, and the bolts on either end, just to make sure that that's not our weak point anymore. The shock body and the rod and everything looks straight, so we're not too worried about that being off. If we really need to, we can take it up to our dealer and he can take a look at it before October 7th, but it looks fine. I don't think we need to bring it up there at all. We'll probably go through and replace most of the bolts on this side anyway, just because this was where a majority of our impact was. But you can see we did throw on a new spindle rod right here, and that was probably the only thing that I really wanted to get done before we hit the track on Sunday, just because it had affected our tow so much that we brought the threads all the way in on these heims and still was running 3/4 out. If I flipped it over, it probably would have been okay. Probably would have been able to still get the tow that we were aiming for, but it would have affected our Ackerman and our bump steer, so didn't really want to keep a bent piece on the car. But everything else looks fine. All of our lower and uppers are straight still. We'll just go through, replace these pieces, and we'll continue to look around the chassis as well and do our nut and bolt check just to say that we did it already. So we got the old rod off here. Like I mentioned before, the rest of the stuff on the right side actually looks pretty good. I don't see the need to really replace that stuff right now if we don't have to. We will probably try and bang this guy out to straighten it up a little bit, just so we have a spare just in case something like that happens again. And then obviously we'll flatten out this bumper, cut those tabs off, and get some new ones welded on. I don't think we'll have enough time or the material to really finish up doing the bumpers, but I know that we have enough stuff to get the right front put back together, so we'll go ahead and work on that in the meantime. After getting the car back on the ground, it's time for us to check the tows, since we did change out that right front radius rod connected to the steering box. Checking tow is pretty simple. If you have these tow plates, you just set it up to where it's centered on the wheel, take two tape measures and read out the readings. We shoot for about an 1/8 inch to a 1/4 inch tow out for the most part, but this can be pretty tedious with these cars, since once you lock down the jam nuts, it tends to move the radius rod a little bit more, so just keep that in mind, have it a little bit short. We went straight up, no tow, and once we tightened it down, it gave us the 1/8 inch. Not too bad of a process, it's just very tedious. Now I'll say that we got off pretty easily considering how hard we hit the 48. I think we just hit tire to tire, so I imagine that spindle rod was the first thing that was going to get messed up. I'm quite surprised that we don't have a dead spot in our steering rack, since that seems to be a pretty common failure with these. Luckily we had that extra rod on hand as well so that we could just swap it out easily, and obviously we threw on some new bolts. We did unfortunately have our right rear seal go bad while we were at the track, so I guess on Saturday night we didn't have any right rear braking, and definitely could have attributed to our looseness during the feature that night. But I'm definitely glad that everything that happened to our car was all very minimal and easy to replace. And it also wasn't super expensive. I think to replace the seal and the spindle rod was only about 25 bucks, plus the $10 in hardware to replace those two bolts right there. We ended up reusing the spacers and the washer on the spindle rod, but the bolts and the lock nuts are all new. We will unfortunately have to cut these tabs off of this bumper, weld on some new ones, as well as cut the ones off of this bumper here and try and run it over to save it and straighten it up a little. I know bumpers are pretty cheap right now, so I'm not too worried about that really, but I do want to try and keep our costs relatively low. We do still have a full set of bumper spares that we can throw on the car, so we're good there technically, but I'd like to have the extras at the track just in case we end up getting caught up in something during the dash again. But like I said, definitely thankful that our night ended better than others. Glad that we were able to bring the car home in one piece for the most part. Glad we didn't have to spend a ton of money to get it ready again for the 7th. Sometimes these cars are pretty easy to work on. Sometimes you get unlucky and bend a clip, or you know, have to get a little bit more involved with the pieces that you're replacing. But definitely looking forward to our last run of the year. Hopefully we're able to figure out a couple more things and get the car settled into our driving style a little bit better. But until then, I appreciate you guys watching. Hope to catch you in the next one.